Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Bastiat. The Serps heard your clip saying rednecks and he only thought of white nationalists. Yeah, that's a problem. Dude, listen, Blue Lives Matter is some dumbass fucking shit. The only thing dumber than Blue Lives Matter, though, is thinking that just because somebody says Blue Lives Matter, they're a fucking white nationalist. That is so cringe. Guys, there's plenty of people that, believe it or not, just fucking love cops. Like, Jesus Christ. They're not fucking white nationalists or Nazis. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, what's up? What do you got?
I heard you want to mow down protesters for the militia movement.
That's the dream, yes.
Well, I thought that the rhetoric in that clip is pretty callous, but I guess the bigger point seemed to be the notion of militias as like
Mm-hmm.
a worthwhile replacement for law enforcement. I don't know. I mean, was it just kind of a heated kind of moment, or
No, I don't think it's a worthwhile replacement, but if you're in a community where the police aren't protecting you, the federal agents have been rejected, and your property is being burned down for a third night in a row, I think, like, I empathize with people that are like, "Hey, we need to round up some dudes and protect some of our local businesses." Like, I don't think that's that insane of a thing. I think that's totally
okay.
fine.
Well, I mean, when you put it that way, yeah, it's hard to argue that individual citizens should get together and defend their property,
Hmm.
in that movement. But I guess when you say like militias, to me, and maybe this is one reason other people reacted the way they did. I think about the militia movement in the United States
Hmm.
that, for example, stormed the Michigan Capitol a few months ago during
Hmm.
the height of the COVID-19 protests.
Hmm.
And then the year
Shut the
before,
fuck up,
they
Living,
in
all right? You
Oregon,
stupid
they
fucking
went to the
meme.
state house there, and they managed to, I guess, phone in enough violent threats to have that proceedings in the Oregon legislature shut down. And
Hmm.
then back in the '90s, there were a lot of problems with militia movements and terror threats. So, in that sense, I guess it depends on what you mean by
Yeah, I
militia.
mean
I
those are bad, but
absolutely,
like the arguments that I've been going with recently are like you've got like the Koreans during the LA race riots, you've got in the '60s like the Black Panthers and stuff. Like I would defend like those types of people showing up and exercising, their Second Amendment rights if they feel like they need to be defended and the government isn't stepping in to do it. Like I think that's an okay cause.
well, I guess it depends then on who you're talking about,
Hmm.
because there are some far right groups in this country that I think could only manage to make the situation worse. On the other hand, like I know you mentioned the rooftop Koreans, I mean
Hmm.
that's just citizens literally trying to defend their community, and I guess
Hmm.
that to me is a world of difference from folks who are, I think, trying to pursue like a broader political cause and who I think have the real potential to make things even worse than destruction of private property.
Potentially, I don't know if I mean if we grant that like communities defending themselves are okay, I don't know if I think it's necessarily indefensible that broader causes could be defended as well. Um, I think that it's possible that my background literally just poisons me in this conversation. I think that destroying another person's property is one of the most disgusting fucking things you can do to somebody.
Yeah,
And if
no, I
somebody
agree.
wanted to travel to like another community because they were standing in defense, like I like as a big lib cuck, I think that like defense of private property is one of the cornerstones of like liberalism and society. If people wanted to go to
Yeah.
other communities even and defend that idea, I think I could see it. Much the same that like if protesters from Chicago wanted to drive up to fucking Portland and protest there because they think that Black Lives Matter all over the country, I think that that's defensible too. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that I would say that I could see it being defensible.
Mm-hmm.
And I absolutely believe that private property is as worthwhile something that should be defended,
Mm-hmm.
or that, you should be free to defend with force as your own life.
Mm-hmm.
What I am basically concerned about is the notion of militias generally, because I think that while it's easy to envision, a militia, just people who are interested in protecting property.
Mm-hmm.
In the United States, we do seem to have some some broader anti-government groups. Like, for example, do you remember that Bundy standoff?
Are you
Um,
talking about the people that like took over like that federal land and had like a standoff with the FBI?
that was the second one. There was also the first one before that.
Yeah.
That was the second Bundy standoff. What happened in the
Mm-hmm.
first one was they're related. I don't know if it was the father in the first one and the
Mm-hmm.
son in the second one or whatever.
Okay.
But the first standoff, I think these were both during the Obama years.
Mm-hmm.
These ranchers out west
Had
had
problems
been,
with like federal declaration of property or some dumb shit or something.
yeah, the federal government controls most of the land out west,
Mm-hmm.
in the western states as a holdover from policy from a century ago.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these ranchers don't like the fact that you have to pay the federal government for the use of those ranching lands.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the feds came out to, I think, repossess the cattle, the original, somebody in the chat here saying the original BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, went in to collect the cattle, as compensation for the fees they weren't paying. And a bunch of these local militia types got together and stopped the federal government from enforcing the law. And President Obama, basically, they just backed down. And this happened later on, when the one you're talking about, where they took over some kind of national park facility in Oregon and barricaded themselves in there for a month until they were eventually kind of sweated out and arrested. I think one of the people who did this was shot on the way out.
I think so.
Yeah. I think this movement. I can understand as a business owner in a pinch. I could understand, like, hey, look, this is my whole life wrapped up in this business, right? But I think I guess just thinking about militias in this country and thinking about the prospect of individual citizens involved in violence.
Yeah, the idea of like roaming militias that go from town to town seems like a bad idea. Yeah, for sure, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, I was more specifically referring to the because people seem to be describing whatever Kyle was part of like as a militia, and if you're going to say that, like, so I guess it comes down a little bit semantic there. It sounds like I'm weaseling out, but like if we're talking about just like a bunch of people showing up to a community to defend it or whatever, like I support that type of militia, I guess. But like an organized form of like we are the militia, whatever, we're going to go around the U.S. like with these protests, that's probably a recipe for fucking disaster, of course. Yeah, for sure.
How do you feel about I guess do you feel like you've got a lot of pushback on this whole discussion since it started? Do you feel like I'm sure you've probably talked about this already, but I'm curious, do you feel like this is mostly the rhetoric that you've used or the ideas you've expressed?
I think it's the ideas that I've expressed, but I think most of the dipshits attacking me realize that they actually can't counter the ideas, so they've tried to focus on the rhetoric instead, and they've tried to just label me a white nationalist. But I haven't found a single person brave enough to come and talk to me, and nobody that's talked to me has put a convincing argument up, like the one or two that have. So yeah, I think most people realize that I'm right. Like, but like online, like it's weird, and I can't tell. There's like this weird. I can't tell if the general consensus of people online is that they defend riots or not. It's very hard for me to tell that because I thought that was a gimme. Like, yeah, obviously we clearly don't defend riots, but it seems like now, like if you attack the concept of riots, people are like, oh, well, you're attacking protesters. Just like if you attack the military, conservatives like, oh, well, you hate the troops. Like, well, what? No, hold on. I can criticize one and support the other. And it feels that's the same way with rioters and protesters now.
Yeah, I don't really understand the impetus to defend rioters and the destruction of private property. Like, it seems like apart from what you would think would be a super small fringe, that's like, it seems like a pretty clear argument to say that there's no win in that. And I know that, do you remember that fella? Gosh, I don't remember his name, but he was briefly famous for being fired for publishing a study saying
David
that,
Shore?
Yes, yep. David Shore. That's the fella. Yeah, so you already know about all this. Yeah, he was fired for putting out a study saying that violent riots basically drive supporters
possibly
into the
swung the election
Party.
For Nixon around the MLK.
Yeah, the original law and order president.
Yeah.
So I guess so. The points I agreed with, or the points I disagreed with you on, were on the notion of militias as good. I think generally they could only add problems to a situation. Although I can also see if you're in a last-ditch situation, I understand.
Oh yeah, it also like super depends. Like I try to, man, I swear to God, when I had these conversations, I try to be really clear, but then things just get clipped, and it's like one thing. In terms of like militias are good, what is morally justifiable isn't always the best course of action. For instance, like a guy walks up to you at a bar. He's clearly bigger than you, could clearly kill you, and he like punches you in the face. Like, I think you're totally morally justified in swinging back, but I don't know if that's going to be the best outcome, right? Like, there are things that are morally justifiable that probably aren't going to produce the best outcomes. Having people like shooting each other in the street over rioting or not rioting, probably not a good outcome, whether or not you're justified in defending your business or not. Yeah, for sure. I of course acknowledge that, yeah.
So why would you, I guess, was it just, you were just really frustrated when you were like, let's mow them down?
I think because people kept saying in my chat that like, oh, well, like people are going to keep rioting, like we should allow riots, or like, oh, like blah, 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 something like that. And I think that my exact quote was like, the frustrating thing for me was that like watching video after video after video of like fucking parts of America burning the fuck down. And then, you know, like seeing the like, oh, well, the swing in Wisconsin for these opinions, blah, 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 and how easy this place for Trump. Like, my worry is that it feels like the only way Trump wins is through this type of shit happening. Now, so far, it doesn't seem like that's materialized in the polls. It seems like Biden has kind of distanced himself from supporting riots, so people don't wrap it up that way. But that type of shit just like worries me and triggers the fuck out of me. And the idea that like people could support riots, it's so fucking bad rhetorically. It's such a horrible fucking thing.
Did you not hear? There was a book that came out called "A Defense of Looting." I think
I haven't seen it, but what about it? Or I've seen the article.
Oh, you saw it, okay. And the book says that among other things, looting, shouldn't be so quick to dismiss it. For example, it allows us to envision a society in which the essentials of life are free. All right, it's sort of a quote proletarian shopping. And so there's
I can't tell if you're giving me a troll argument or not.
No, that's the defenses they were making of this kind of activity, right? I mean,
well, I'm good on it.
Imagining a decommodified society, all right, where money doesn't rule everything. Not really. It doesn't really resonate with you, huh?
Yeah, not much. Maybe in the future, but yeah.
No. Well, I guess I would say this. The other point I disagree with that I remember, because I reviewed the debate you had with Bosch, was I broadly agreed with you on self-defense, including private property. But you said something about once you have stopped aggressing, once you basically have retreated. Like if we assume that this guy wasn't originally, like he was the original aggressor, right? It sounded like you were saying, no, once you've retreated, you've got no right to chase. No moral right to
I agree.
pursue.
Yeah.
Okay. So why? Because my position is once you've aggressed, okay, you've aggressed. I've got a right to end the threat. And just because you're retreating doesn't mean you're still not a threat.
Well, I mean, like if there are cases where retreat, like I generally think we shouldn't kill people if we can avoid it. So like, for instance, let's say that I'm going to be attacked by a 9-year-old. Let's say this 9-year-old legitimately wants to kill me. I'm pretty confident that I can neutralize the threat without killing the 9-year-old. So like I have some like imperative to not kill said 9-year-old, right? So like if somebody is aggressing on me, but then they're retreating afterwards, then it seems like now I have other options available to me to resolve the conflict. I can contact authorities, I can defend myself better, I can remove myself from the scenario. Like we can do things that like, yeah. I think that there's a fundamental difference between like shooting somebody that's about to kill you versus somebody that threatened to kill you is running away and then shooting them in the back. Because it seems like now there's more options available to us to neutralize the threat that don't involve killing the person. Yeah.
I don't really understand why the options really change the situation though. Like if you have the right, like why are the options, like if you have options in the heat of the moment versus if you have options in 10 minutes versus if you have options in 10 months, like why does the elapse of time really change anything?
Because I believe that your morally defensible self-defense is basically what is the minimum level of force that you can use to neutralize a threat that is a clear and imminent danger to you at this particular point in time. And that's like your threshold. Now, for a woman being approached by a large man, the only way she might be able to stop him might be killing him at that very moment in time. But if he's like removed himself from the situation, well, now she has time to contact another person, to contact authorities, to remove herself from the situation. Like now there's more options or opportunities. To kill him at that point is no longer self-defense. Now it's just like vengeance or retribution, which is a fundamentally different topic, I think. I think you have a right to keep your persons secure and safe, but if the person is like disengaged from you, well, you're engaging in something that's fundamentally not self-defense, unless we're going to use some weird Bush like preemptive self-defense argument or something.
No, I mean, two things about that. Yeah. First of all, it sounds like, unless I'm mixing this up, it sounds like that was the argument that Bosch was making about escalation of force, only respond with the appropriate amount of force to the situation, right?
Yeah, and so, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't agree with that. I thought you didn't agree with that too.
But
it sounds like that is your position.
No. So there's two very clear things. So I don't agree with a proportional response. What I agree with is that you have a response that is the minimum level of violence necessary to neutralize a threat that doesn't endanger your person. That's not always going to be proportional. So, for instance, in the example I gave before, large man going to punch a small woman, her response, her proportional response, isn't going to be to punch the guy because he's punching her. It's probably going to be to shoot him if she has a gun, right? Because that's the minimum level of force that she can exert without endangering her own person. However, once the threat is gone, like they've disengaged or they're moving back, and you've got other options available to you, killing them at that point is no longer self-defense. Now it's like a preemptive attack, or now it's like a retribution thing. Yeah.
That's the other thing. So I would acknowledge that this is not the kind of thing I would build a legal regime like to support, but like morally speaking, so I wouldn't say this is what the law should be. But like morally speaking, you have made clear that you are willing to use force against me, even though I have done nothing to merit it. So then how are you really fundamentally less of a threat to me a couple minutes later than you were right at the moment in time?
Well, you're less of a threat because I have more options to deal with you now, right? So, for instance, a man with a gun facing right in front of me is far more of a threat to me than a man with a gun who wants to kill me who's located in Germany, right? Even though they both represent the same level of force, there's a difference in imminence.
Yeah, I don't know. Just to me that, this right of like moral self-defense, I acknowledge that this isn't something I would ever put into practice in law, but it just doesn't seem to me like things really change just because you may have more options. And you may, in fact, not have more options anywhere.
Well,
if you're somebody who, for example, is in a community that is not well policed, if you don't have the resources for more adequate means of self-defense, and if you know that, this person maybe has a history of violence anyway, like it seems to me it'd be pretty easy to paint a case where you don't really have much in the way more options, but this person is still aggressed, and all they've done is put you at risk by then retreating before you do something about it.
I feel like I disagree, because then it feels like at that point then, or I guess my question to you would be, let's say somebody shows up and let's say he says like, I'm going to kill you, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually he fucks off. He leaves, he walks away. Let's say that you find out this guy lives like 2 states away. Okay. Let's say that you spend like the next month, you get a gun, you start training, 1,000 rounds a day down at the range, you're fucking hardcore. And then you drive to his state, you wait outside his work. He comes out, you shoot him in the back of the head, and then you drive away. Was that self-defense?
Yeah, it would depend, I guess, on how credible the threat is. Like that part is squirmy to me because, like, a credible threat is, a credible threat is totally contextual. But like, if he engaged in physical violence first, then morally, I don't see an issue with that.
So like that seems
against you.
So I don't believe that like just because somebody engaged in violence against you at some point means that you now have like a pass to kill them infinitely into the future, as long as they still like, I don't know, I guess. My like the 4-point thing that I think of that is like, I'm pretty sure it's related to legal arguments, is usually like somebody's attacking you for no reason. They have like, if they attack you, you're going to get hurt, right? They can either kill you or you're going to like endure a great injury. You have the ability to respond against them in some way to shut them down, and whether or not like you're in like imminent danger. Like those are like that's like the thing that I think of. If you remove any one of those things, then it changes significantly. Like if you're no longer an imminent, if somebody on the internet like DMs me and he's like, I'm gonna fucking kill you, Destiny, and I'm like, really? Not if I kill you first. Like, I don't know. That doesn't sound like self-defense to me. Like that's. Yeah.
No, but if it was a credible threat, or if somebody had engaged, which is a contextual argument, I think that would be different.
Sure.
Now, that being said, I would not implement such a regime. I recognize that such a situation enacted in practice would lead to chaos and anarchy and all kinds of weird nonsense. But nevertheless, it feels like a consistent position to me. And like you said, I think earlier on when we first started talking, the reason I brought this up is you said something to the effect of, just because there's something that might be moral doesn't mean that it is something that we should do. Right? So, and I do want to say, somebody in your chat just said, Bastiat is taking this ridiculous position to make Destiny's position seem better than lefties. I am not. This is just my own home-cooked ridiculous. Well, I think it's a legit position, but no, there's no gamesmanship here. Okay.
Yeah, so, I totally fundamentally disagree, but I understand it. I don't think it's like, I don't think it's like completely and totally unbelievably insane, but like I feel like if I were to run this through if I were to think of like how this plays out in all of society, if we all embrace this moral system, it just seems like pretty weird that like a whole bunch of people could basically be carrying like a moral right to kill contract on other people.
You'd only get this kind of moral contract right to kill if you aggressed in the first place. So I mean, I think that like a lot of our, and this is, I guess, to talk about crime generally.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have a lot of overcriminalization in this country, a lot of overcriminalization of drugs, a lot of, it's probably the case given the extent of our federal criminal law
Mm-hmm.
that everybody in this country has committed some kind of crime at some point.
Yeah.
But I think that violent crime, on the other hand, is something that I don't think there's much justification to ever engage in violent crime.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that violent crime ought to be treated a lot more differently and I would include property crime, in violent crime as a form of violence. I think people ought to be, I think that ought to be treated a lot more harshly, and nonviolent crimes like drugs and things like that ought to be treated a lot more leniently, So, I mean, because after all, I think I forget what happened with George Floyd, but we were talking about Breonna Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
And Eric Garner, for example, he was killed by the police for selling loose cigarettes in violation of the tax code,
Mm-hmm.
apparently in New York. So these are people who are dying as a result of nonviolent crime.
Mm-hmm.
So and of course in Breonna Taylor's case, not even she wasn't even involved. It was a mistaken rape. So anyway. Okay. Well, so that was it. Otherwise, I thought your self-defense position was pretty reasonable. And I guess I'm surprised by all the pushback of folks against the notion that, property is worth defending, because it seems to me that position, I guess, suggests that, the amount of times I've seen people bring up the notion of insurance this past week.
Dude, don't even get me fucking started, bro. Like, nobody has any, and I understand, I'm empathized, because a lot of these kids are like 15, 16 or whatever, and it's whatever. Yeah. But like, dude, filing an insurance claim and shit, you have no fucking idea. Even fucking basic shit like homeowners insurance can be a goddamn nightmare to get payouts on that shit. I have an aunt that lives in Florida who had a hurricane damage to her house, and the way that they went about releasing those funds, she had to bring an assessor out, figure out the total cost of damage, bring out they would disperse like 1/8 of the funds. She'd bring out some person to do some work. They'd bring out another assessor to make sure that work was done up to code. Then they gave her a little bit more. It took her like fucking 2 years to get all of I think it was for Wilma or what was it, Wilma, or was it a different hurricane name? I don't remember.
I don't know. We got plenty of them down here.
It was like fucking 10 years ago or whatever, but oh my god, dude, like oh no, yeah, fuck. But yeah, like the idea that people are like, oh, just get insurance. Like, could you imagine if you were responding with like, oh, like you have cancer, bro, just get insurance, LOL. Like,
yeah, well, the point I think that I heard that you made, I didn't hear it myself, but I heard you made this point that basically property is not just a thing. It is time in your life that you have turned into something, right? Yeah. That is a part of your life that then, when destroyed, you may not get back. And in any event, I don't think you should be under an obligation to suffer that kind of loss because somebody else has chosen to put their life in danger. Yeah. I mean, I think that the right to life lasts until you say, you can't respond to me because I have a right to life. I don't think that's fair.
Yeah, fuck that. You have a right to life, but you don't have a right to fuck my shit up. Fuck you.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So.
All right.
Well, it's interesting subject. I will say for the first 3 days after that, I wasn't even really going to talk much about it. But the only question I got from anyone on anything was, "What do you think about Destiny in the Shooter? What do you think about Destiny in the Shooter?"
Yeah, I don't think it was that controversial, but yeah. All right.
All right. Well, hey, take care. Have a good rest of your trip.
I love everybody. Be careful, okay?
Bye.
Bye.
Torture your cock and balls must endure. 2 spaces forward, your cock will be stretched.